Today's ride will take in the sight of a decisive moment in Scottish history. What you're looking at here is the end part of essentially a civil war. We'll talk about some fictional history too. And you might notice the chain around the Fraser one. That's to stop the Outlander fans licking the stone to Clan Fraser for Jamie Fraser. And a beautiful site of prehistory. Okay, now this is the off-road bit that might be somewhat dodgy, shall we say. I admit there's less riding and more talking in this video, but hopefully I'll keep you with me on the way to the last pitched battle on British soil. I do like combining chores with a new ride. A car service needing an early start and a 2-hour drive. The other advantage of having breakfast is it lets the worst of the Inverness rush hour get past. And yes, there is a rush hour in Inverness. And we have now picked up 2 Sustrans route, the Locks and Glens way, which is Route 7, and Route 1, and that's the long distance route. The title probably gave it away, but if you haven't guessed where I'm heading, here's a clue. We're gonna rock down to Culloden Avenue. Now you could make the case that where we're going today changed the entire course of the history of this country, because it was the last stand of a rebellious army and this might be a surprise, the last major battle on British soil. Woo! This cherry blossom's incredible. Wow. I'm actually going the wrong way, but I just want to see the cherry blossom. Better turn around. Most people have heard of Culloden, and more recently, of course, it kind of featured in the Outlander series. But it was the 1745 rebellion led by Charles Edward Stuart, the Bonnie Prince, that did quite well. Picked up a lot of people in Manchester, and they got as far with their rebellion, got as far south as Derby. But then it all went wrong. Forced to retreat, they suffered a series of defeats, which culminated in what happened just here. What you're looking at here is the end part of essentially a civil war. When I think it was James II had 2 daughters and they had no surviving heirs despite having a lot of kids, and so they had to go hunting for a new king for Britain, and they came up with George, who was Hanoverian from Germany, didn't really like Britain much but came to be king, and a lot of people thought, well, he shouldn't be king, it should be James. And James in Latin is Jacob, and you quickly get from that to Jacobites. So essentially you have the 2 sides who think different people should be king. And that came to a head here on Culloden Moor. From my route you can see how close Culloden is to Inverness, and that was the Jacobites' last stronghold, which King George's son, the Duke of Cumberland, was determined to take. The Jacobites had barely eaten for days when they faced the well-trained government troops. If you can see these blue flags, these represent where the Jacobites lined up, and over there in the far distance you can just see a red flag to the right of that big memorial cairn. That's where the government troops were, and this lot, Jacobites, fired first with cannon and bombarded them. But it took them 5 minutes to reload theirs. These guys are professionals, and they were coming back every 30 seconds. And what's more, they had a weapon that it wasn't a cannonball. When the cannon came in, it could explode. It was like cannon shot. So one shot could do an awful lot of damage. So the Jacobites realized pretty quickly that wasn't going to work. They were completely outgunned. So they decided they would resort to the Highland charge. They went off at a jog across this moor When they got closer, they fired their muskets, then threw them away. They were no use, they couldn't reload them, and then they were yelling. They had their claymores out, bagpipes playing, the muskets would have created that smoke and the fog of battle, and this was the way they had won all their battles. All the battles got them all the way to Derby. Except on this occasion, it didn't work. And this is why. Peat bog. So much of this area was just claggy, deep, horrible peat bog that people just couldn't Highland charge through it. Now, they're not daft, they knew it was bog. So what tended to happen was they tended to funnel into one area. Well, that was just like a shooting gallery. So Cumberland actually got his troops to surround them and then fire the muskets just into the people in the middle. Didn't matter if it was friendly fire. Very often they were shooting their own people, but he just wanted anything in that circle to be destroyed. And I mean, then they tried to retreat. Some tried to leg it back to Inverness, but the cavalry by that time had gone round the back, cut them off and cut them down. And that was when the repression started. The tours here are well worth taking for the true story of what happened on the 16th of April 1746.
Culloden is the result of a British civil war. There are Scotsmen and Englishmen on both sides. There's already been 60 years of civil war up until this point.
Learning how Cumberland's repression of all things Highland, dress, culture, arms, lasted 10 years and changed the nature of the Highlands. That these headstones to clan chiefs were another Victorian invention. There was no English side. Outlander has done something of disservice to the facts. And you might notice the chain around the Fraser one. That's to stop the Outlander fans licking the stone to Clan Fraser for Jamie Fraser. The whole battle took just 40 minutes or so, and the conclusion was devastating for the Jacobites, as shown in the latest memorial. You'll notice these wee sticky out stones. There are 50 on this side, and they represent the dead on the government troops side. That's all that Cumberland said he lost. He's probably making it up. There's a flat period here in the wall, and then, well, these are all the individuals, or they represent the individuals who were lost on the Jacobite side. And there are 1,500 of them. All lost in a space of 40 minutes. Standing stone in a field there. Actually, will you indulge me just one more bit of history? This one is 4,000 years old. There's an Outlander link here too. The Claver cairns are thought to be the inspiration for the magical time-slip standing stones. Over the years, there's been quite a lot of uncertainty as to what these were built for. Was it for the living, or was it to somehow commemorate the dead? Certainly, they have been repurposed by different generations. Like 1,000 years after they were built, Pictish people came in and they started using them for the dead. But the original meanings, not too sure as to what they were for. But on the shortest day of the year, you've got to imagine the people who've settled here in the Nairn Valley, the shortest day of the year, the sunlight streams down some of these corridors and lights up the back. And that has really got to mark a turning point in the fortunes of those people. They'd be just praying for the sun to come back and for their crops to grow. And they're the ones waiting to give birth. And they're the ones who already have. Okay, now this is the off-road bit that might be somewhat dodgy, shall we say. I don't know if you can hear that, but at the top of this path there is the A9, which is a very fast road that I do really not want to be riding on. There's meant to be one of these sort of wibbly-wobbly ways around it. Might have a look at the map at the top. Right. That wasn't actually the off-road bit. Well, it was, but there's a bit of this B road and then there's a route I've plotted. We'll see if that goes. This is the best riding of the day, almost smooth enough to pick up some speed. Almost. Pondering all I've learned today, the cultural repression of the Highlands, then the clearances a century later, might have worked for a while. But then what happened? You got Queen Victoria and her German husband going full-on Scots with Balmoral, Walter Scott and all the others, created this whole idea of the noble hard-pressed Scot, the clans, the tartans, and to a certain extent that's what exists today. I suppose it faded a bit, but then the likes of Braveheart and more recently Outlander brought it back to a new generation. Now, is that a problem? Because I was really impressed by our tour guide, because he said who is here for Outlander and then politely explained why the history was not as it seems in Outlander. And I think having listened to that will prompt people to find out a deeper understanding of the true history that went on around the Jacobite rebellion, around the clearances, and perhaps they'll want to give themselves a deeper knowledge of what actually went on here in the Scottish Highlands. But please, if you are coming here, by all means call it a wilderness, just don't call it a wilderness, eh? Which brings me back to where I started. And there's the thing, if you are going to an area you don't normally go for, a chore, whatever it is, in my case the car service, take your bike and try and have an adventure while you're there. And speaking of adventures, I think you might like this one. It really helped me if you would take a look at it now, give it a click. I'll see you again next time. Bye-bye.